This is Florian Birkmayer, MD from Aroma-gnosis, and I wanted to talk about 5 practical ways to interrupt your default mode network. I did a previous video on the default mode network, what it is, and how to hack it, how to really disrupt it. And some of the feedback I got was, well, how can we do that? Give us some practical tips. So this is my attempt at offering some practical tips. And just to quickly review, the default mode network is a network in the brain that was first discovered in functional MRI scanners when the researchers would say to people, well, now don't think of anything in particular. And the idea was, or the hypothesis was, well, if you don't do anything in particular, if you're just lying there in the MRI scanner, your brain's going to kind of quiet down, like, become less active overall. And actually, that's not what happened. A certain network became more active. And that's what was called the default mode network, that when everything else was quieted down, by default, this network became more active. And once it was discovered, it was researched, and it turns out it plays a lot of roles in everyday life and in all sorts of self-defeating patterns. So in everyday life, the typical example is you're driving a road you've driven 100 times to work or to the store, and when you get there, you don't even remember. It's like you were on autopilot. Like you were awake, you were driving, you stopped at the stop sign, used turn signals, hopefully, but you don't remember it. Most of your brain sort of went into this screensaver mode. Now, this isn't just the only time this happens. There's more and more evidence that a lot of quick judgments are in the default mode network. So when you click like on Facebook or something similar on other social media, I think that's really knowingly or unknowingly a way to manipulate your default mode network. Quick judgments, these judgments you don't even think about. And really, if you zoom out a little bit, it's really the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. It does involve sort of predicting the future, telling a certain story of the past, but the story we tell ourselves of ourselves is really the ego. I mean, that's basically what the ego does. So I think the ego is just a program running in the default mode network. And as I've talked about previously, there are times and benefits to wanting to disrupt the default mode network. And disrupt may sound a little weird or oversimplified. What it really means is when we're on this autopilot mode, the default mode network is more internally connected and has lost connection to other parts of the brain. And the other area where default mode network is very important, we're realizing it plays a big role in depression and probably treatment-resistant depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of the symptoms, intrusive symptoms, hypervigilant symptoms, many of those symptoms. It plays a role in substance abuse. I think it plays a role in disorders on the spectrum now, OCD. So more and more we're realizing how these programs in the default mode network really rule us. I don't think they respond to conventional pharmacology. Sometimes they respond to therapy. It has, as I mentioned in the previous video, in psychedelic research, certain psychedelics show that this internal connectedness is decreased and the default mode network is able to re-increase connection to other areas. And then, as I also mentioned before, I found one study that showed that you doing a task with the olfactory stimulus, they measured that decrease in activity or yeah, disrupting the default mode network, let's say. So let's talk about some practical things. I think I want to show you first how to just smell an aroma meditatively. Something I've did for many years is setting an intention and anointing yourself in the morning or anointing yourself anytime there's a role change, going to work, coming home from work, going to a particular setting. Um, I'm going to talk about having an aroma with you, sort of like a touchstone in your pocket or a place like that, and also about aroma-guided journaling or active imagination. So just start with the first one. Pick an aroma that touches you. I mean, I think it's important to mention this. Many aromas, many essential oils smell really good, but they don't touch us. They don't move us. And to me, what's much more important then how nice an aroma smells or how good the analysis looks is, does it touch me? So take an aroma that touches you. Um, I picked for today our jasmine attar, which is jasmine sunbark, night flowering jasmine distilled into sandalwood essential oil. And I'm just gonna, um, using a scent strip. So this is smelling an aroma meditatively, and you can do this for as briefly as you want or as long as you want. But it's, there's obviously an aspect of ritual involved. What I just did, you get your aroma, you pick, well, which aroma do I want to connect with today, and you can repeatedly do that with the same aroma, and then just say, okay, I'm just going to take some time out and smell this aroma. And we just like scent strips because you can control the amount of scent. It's not a diffuser, and there's just and then it's better than smelling it straight from the bottle because you get the full bouquet. So as you get your aroma, just quiet your mind. I'm going to be talking even if I'm wanting to enjoy the aroma myself. And as Kathy always says, you can't smell and think at the same time. So as you really smell the aroma, step out of your mental chatter or switch off your mental chatter. Just focus on your breath. And what I'm feeling, as I allowed that quieting, I felt like this very powerful wave. Jasmine's a very powerful aroma, just spread from my nose through my body, chest, and then I felt it going down my arms, down my body, and of course these aromas enter us and touch us at this very deep level, which is why I call them the molecules of connectedness. They remind us of that connection. And I gotta say, today's been a busy day. I had all this to-do list sort of cycling around, ricocheting around in my head, and now I'm just grateful I'm here. I get to share this with you, how I work with aromas. If it helps, you can use the model of the concentric circles. How is this touching me on a physical level? So I talked about that wave that was going through my body. I feel less restless. I feel very centered and grounded, yet alert at the same time. And you can spend more time in the physical body, sort of just what else is it bringing your awareness to, the temperature, the energy level. Yeah, it's good to have a body. It's a real blessing. And take as long as you need, and then maybe shift your awareness, sort of zoom out to the emotional body. And again, like many of us, anxiety has been a frequent visitor to me, and I can honestly say now that I'm just really enjoying connecting with this aroma, with this plant soul. I don't feel any anxiety. I'm just really centered in myself, not in the past or the future beside myself. And again, take as long as you need in the emotional body. And when the time is right, shift to the mental body. And again, I mentioned that to-do list, I mentioned sort of the busyness, and I feel much more focused and clear now. Like there's room. There isn't this clutter and noise in my mental body right now. The next body, and again I'm rushing through this, would be the spiritual body. And when I tune into that, the message really is what a gift. I'm so grateful I get to share my passion with you, that I get to spend my time doing this for myself, exploring myself, working with clients, empowering clients and students to reconnect. Aromas reconnect us. They reconnect us to all the living beings around us, the plants, the Gaia, the Gaia consciousness. And then, you can spend more time in each body. You can go further, but I want to give you some other ideas. So I'm going to um, talk about anointing. So anointing, and there's a separate video on anointing, is just a way of doing something, again, ritualistic. Um, I guess not. I couldn't open this aroma. Maybe I wasn't meant to. So for this, I'm going to use Rukus. You can use, I used sandalwood for years. I used other aromas, and I do what I call the 9-point anoint, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, and the heart, and 9. So and there's apparently an acupuncture point here that's important, and I first figured this out with my sleep oil, but it's just that doing it the same way every time. Ritual is a way for the conscious and the unconscious to get on the same page. Ritual is the language of the unconscious. And when we do a ritual, we consciously say to the unconscious, hey, here's something I'd like to do, instead of, when the ego wants to blaze ahead without considering the unconscious usually says, hold my beer, and shows us how powerful it is by interfering. So ritual is a way of saying, okay, are we on the same page? I'm open to that. And so with this anointing I just did, it's great to set an intention. So my intention right now is just to really be in that grounded joy, even as the anxiety swirls all around me. And then as I go through my day, and this is something nice to do in the morning, either if I carry the aroma with me, like I'll talk about, and smell it, even if I don't do a whole anointing, or even if I don't consciously remember my intention, it'll unconsciously remind myself. And even a little dab I put here, in 20 minutes or so, I'll be smelling it still. Again, this is a rather longer lasting oil aroma with many base notes. But every time we smell it, there's that default mode. Oh, you might not even remember your intention, but something will shift. So this is a very nice way. You set your intention in the morning or whenever, and then either from smelling how you anointed yourself, and again, we don't just smell with our nose. All these areas where I anointed, the aroma goes through the skin, goes into our bloodstream. It'll just keep interrupting the default mode network. And you can do this with, I like doing it with the same aroma every day for a while, but you can do different aromas depending on different intention, different days, and it is a great way of also deepening your relationship with aromas, so that when you do this for a while, what happened to me, and I feel it'll happen to you, is you might not be anywhere near the aroma, and you get an olfactory hallucination. I don't like that word, but you'll get a smell, and you're like, why am I smelling this? The sandalwood or whatever isn't anywhere near, but it's the aroma sort of psychically speaking to you, saying, hey, you need me right now. So pay attention when you get these. I wish there was a better word, and maybe you can come up with one. But when you get an olfactory hallucination, it's a soul-to-soul message. Another way of letting the aroma say, "Hey, pay attention, disrupt the default mode network." One specific application of what I just showed, I worked in the inpatient psychiatric unit, which I honestly loved, but it's also a place of such intense human suffering, and so when you go there in the morning, before I'd go there, I'd anoint myself with essential oil. And I felt like I was trying to create a bubble of light around me so that I wouldn't take whatever personal baggage I had from the night into that space. And also that I would sort of have a bit of a protective armor, a bubble of light, that I wouldn't take on people's suffering as much as, we're always going to take it on to some extent. And then when I'd come home, first thing I'd do is anoint myself again. And it was a ritual, a reminder to my unconscious, okay, you're not at work anymore. Now you're in a different place, home. Cleanse, clear whatever you've picked up energetically, and have that new bubble of light for whatever it is you're going to do. And you can really do that at almost any scene change, role change. Let's say you visit some friends or family members that might push you into your old default mode network, to be blunt, into the old habit. Maybe just as you're about to ring the doorbell or show up at their place, anoint yourself. and you don't have to, if you have an intention, great. But other than, you could just say, okay, I just want to be surrounded by a bubble of light. Um, I've done this when I go to Costco because going to those big box stores can be really, you can pick up a lot of psychic garbage there. So anytime you're in a setting where you want to be not in your default mode, you don't want to be a sponge emotionally, you don't want to be a hyper, or you don't want to be as unconscious about your patterns, great time to do it. Now, I've already alluded to this, but what I do is I have this little pouch that I made. Um, just small. I mean, maybe it's a little big. You could have a smaller one, but I have a few essential oils in here, and honestly, um, it's great to take them out as often as I think of it. But even just feeling that here does something unconscious. It's the aromas still speak to me. I promise you, even if they're in the bottle, even if I don't smell them consciously, just their presence, my relationship with them, speaks to me, and I'll think of it at the oddest, most quote random times, and I think that's the aroma saying, "Hey, time to disrupt. Time to disrupt." I used to carry a bottle of sandalwood essential oil, a small one, 5 milliliters, in my pants pocket for years, and so then you're reaching for your keys, you're reaching for your wallet or whatever else you carry, and there it is, and your finger touching it. Again, it's not exactly olfaction, but it's that same reminder. Like, even if you're not conscious of it, it does something, and it might just say, "Hey, time to smell, time to anoint." But even if you're touching it and you don't do anything with it, I think it disrupts. I think it disrupts the default mode network. It gives you that breathing space. And when you notice these things, when I notice my pouch, or someone says, "Oh, what's that bulge in your shirt?" or um, I'm getting more mindful about saying, "Okay, let me take a breath. Let me get out of default mode. Let me zoom out. Let me just..." And another way, I guess, to get out of default mode, it's very sort of driven. I got to get to work. I got to get to the store. I got to do this. This is what the future looks like. So just taking a moment to breathe, to say, and what am I hearing? What am I feeling on my skin? Is there a breeze? What's the temperature? Just really coming into your body with any of these reminders is another great way of, I think, disrupting the default mode network. Because the default mode network um, is very task oriented, and I was going to say somewhat dissociative. I can't explain that, but I think when we're really task focused, that's maybe one of the more useful why we're able to dissociate. And another sort of deeper way of working with the aromas and really sort of understanding our programming more is what I would call aroma-guided journaling, or doing an active imagination, sort of just more focused, or more with more time set aside than the initial meditation I mentioned. Um, Set some time aside, get a journal, smell an aroma, and just write. Stream of consciousness writing. Maybe use your non-dominant hand. I go like this, but recently I've been typing a lot, and it's just so fast. It's great to, you could even, most phones now have a audio record function, or even a transcribe function. You could just sort of talk to yourself. And at first, I think if you just do it automatically, there will be default mode chatter, really. And it's interesting to become aware of what's actually there when we sort of listen without judgment. And that's a big part. And I think where the aroma creates the space as you smell it to observe what's coming through your mind without that instant judgment, that instant editing, and even the urge to judge and edit. Pay attention to that. Oh, that's a stupid thought. Write it down. The fact that you thought that was a stupid thought. And then as you keep working with the aroma, as you keep smelling it, as you keep journaling, automatic writing, or actively imagining, something will change. Something truly surprising will come up, something from the unconscious. And that's why it's surprising, because it's a surprise to the default mode, to the ego. And so this is more deep, and so you get really a deeper perspective on, wow, this is the patterns I'm always in, or frequently in, and I wasn't even aware I was doing it. Like, I didn't even know how I got to the store. And then these other messages can be real epiphanies. I guess another aspect of this, everything I've talked about is something you can do yourself, but then I'm just remembering my mantra, healing is beholding. So, work with someone else, do the active imagination together, encourage each other to anoint or to smell an aroma. I think when we behold each other, that's another way of disrupting the default mode network. So I've talked about a few ways of disrupting the default mode network. I've talked about, um, just smelling the aroma to interrupt what we're in the moment. I've talked about sort of more in a scheduled way, or whenever you feel like anointing yourself, setting an intention, usually in the morning, or anointing yourself every time there is a scene change, role change, environment change, going to work, coming home from work, picking the kids up from school, going to see friends or relatives, anything like where there's a default mode you'd like to change. I talked about carrying an aroma with you, and I talked about the more in-depth sort of automatic writing with aromas to sort of be a front row spectator on our own default mode networks continuous movie that's being written. So let me know what you think. If you haven't subscribed, maybe share the video with a friend. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, head on over to AromaGnosis.com, sign up to our newsletter. We have some free downloads. We also have introductory classes. So if you want to deepen your relationship with yourself, really, if you want to deepen your relationship with nature, we think aromas are just a great ally. They're definitely not our only ally. So head on over to AromaGnosis.com, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks.